Hi, I'm Rick Belden, and this is Masculinity from the Inside Out, an exploration of the inner lives of men. If you find this content valuable, please like, share, and ring the bell for notifications. Thank you.
Talk about talk about what it does for the mentor to give guidance, authentic guidance through this relationship that he's cultivated with the younger person, and the feeling and the satisfaction or whatever emotions that come to him through seeing that younger person who he's taken under his wing succeed. Because to me, it's almost, through my coaching and my mentoring over the years, there's almost really no word for it. It almost seems like magic, like universal magic, to really be like, wow, my presence in this person's life is actually giving them tangible and intangible positive results. Like,
Yeah.
so just talk about that, and then I'll share some of my experiences. Like, what
Okay.
what did that do for you?
Well, there's a lot that could be said about that, so I'll just kind of go off the top of my head. I mean, one of the things for me is that I've always felt like, I mean, despite the fact that I didn't get all the kind of older male modeling, the mentoring and validation that would have served me best.
Hmm.
I got a lot. And so I remember all of those people, and I remember the impact that they had on my life. And I remember how important and how critical it was for me. You know, for example, there was a guy one time, this is before I really started college. I was working in a company, and I decided, well, I'm going to go to college, so I'm going to quit. And this guy just stepped forward and said, you don't have to quit. We'll put you on a leave of absence. You can come and work in the summers, and you can stay on our health insurance. It's like that guy didn't have to do that. But he made a tremendous difference for me. And so for me, I have always wanted to carry that forward. Like I always promise myself, if I get into a position where I can do that for somebody else, I'm going to do it. And so for me, it feels like it kind of closes the loop on that, in terms of what
Yeah.
was done for me, I'm passing it on. It's also important for me, especially more and more as I've gotten older. I don't want the learning that I've experienced in my life to stop with me. I want to be able to extend that so that the learning that I experience in my life as an individual can be carried forward and developed and extended by people who aren't me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and also it helps me with my own personal development too, because it's challenging. I mean, anytime you have to demonstrate or articulate something to somebody else, you get to know it better. And so
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then as you said, there's just that aspect of service, which I think is, again, that's just important to me, like adding value to other people's lives, uh, that in the unique way that only you can. Um, for me, that's an important part of my mission, I guess, as a human being, to be able to do that. So those are all different aspects. And I actually, just to kind of extend this a little bit for a moment, I've got a family across the street with a couple of little boys, and the little guy, one of the older guy who's like, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that, decided he was going to start selling things. And so I've been challenging him. I've been negotiating with him. When he wants to sell me a little bamboo spear he carved out, it's just like, well, how much is that? It's like, it's $1. And I just sort of like, I go back and forth with him a little bit because it's like, well, this is a good opportunity. He's kind of oriented toward being an entrepreneur anyway.
Mhm.
So let's take advantage of the situation and just like kind of don't patronize the kid, you know, treat him like he's actually selling me something, you know, because again, that gives him the opportunity to advance his development along that track. And why not? I mean, the opportunity's there and it's fun, and he enjoys it. I enjoy it. And then he goes back to his dad and says, "Oh, that guy's tough. That's the hardest sale I had all day long." It's like, well, yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
good experience, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all of those perspectives you just provided resonate with me. I know that, like, there's a completion process, so to say, that happens whenever you take what you've been given and what you've experienced and lived through, and you pass it on. And then,
Hmm.
and then, whether it's a completed process or something that you're still in, let's say career wise or whatever, getting intimate with your ideas and spreading them presently with another, you learn them in a different way. You learn them more, and you you refine things as you teach them. And I really started to realize that after I made a conscious effort to, like, as I was learning stuff, if I didn't have to teach if I didn't have someone to teach it to, I write about it, just to keep it in it. And it's a similar dynamic. um
That's externalization. That's something I work with clients on a lot. Externalization, where you
okay,
actually
okay,
you take something.
elaborate on that.
Yeah, you take something that's like in your thoughts or something that's internal, like things you've learned,
Hmm.
and you represent them and express them externally. And in the process of doing that, you develop them into a more mature and sort of sophisticated form. And you can also see it, as opposed to it's just sort of like a bunch of disconnected kind of fragments. You actually have to assemble it, and then you have to express it in a way that is understandable to somebody else. And in the
Yeah.
process of doing that, you understand it better yourself. Your your understanding, your learning is deeper, and you can reference it, and it frees up space for the next thing.
Hmm.
You kind of got it out there, and you can share it that way with other people, and then they can benefit from it too, or they can come back to you and say, hey, can you tell me more about this? And then you can develop it even further.
Hmm. Hmm. Really helpful practice, because like, there, I know from personal experience that whenever you are able to write down what you're thinking, whether it's about something that you want to bring forth, in forms of like a business plan or something like that, or even if it's just like your own feelings, your own conflicted um um emotions that you may have towards one area or one situation in your life, to write them down and then articulate them, and just look at them. It's just like, it changes it changes your relationship to it, and also makes it a lot easier to digest.
Mm-hmm. It does. It does. And it also, you create an artifact that you can refer back to at
Hmm.
any point in time.
Hmm.
So you can look at something that you wrote 10 years ago and review it and go, well, wow, I could have written that today. But other parts of it, you're like, yeah, I've moved through that. And again, that's another way of mentoring, when you can't, because you can't show up physically for every single person who might benefit from what you know. And so when you externalize things, when you represent them in written form, when you represent them as art, um, you can then share those with anybody. The person doesn't even ever have to make contact with you. And again, you're actually passing on what you've learned. You're passing on your wisdom. You're providing modeling for people. And so there were a lot of writers and artists and performers that I filled in my mentor gap uh, just by the fact that they did something artistic or something expressive that spoke to me and inspired me to do something like that, or inspired me to think in a different way about my experience. So there are lots and lots and lots of ways that older men can show up for younger men and for teens and boys. Uh, I think the key thing is, as I said earlier, do you realize that you have something that can be of value to somebody who's not where you are in life? Because it's very easy for a lot of us to kind of look at ourselves and go, "Oh, I'm a mess." There's just so much stuff that I haven't figured out. And yeah, I think sometimes people are afraid too of being called out as imposters if they put themselves forward.
I've
In that,
definitely felt that for sure.
yeah, because there's that fear of like, man, I'm gonna fumble this explanation. I'm gonna say this in a bad way. I'm not going to be able to show them what I want to show them, and they're going to realize I don't know what I'm doing.
I definitely feel like in that aspect, the the universe will help guide you along if you focus. This is what I've learned. If you focus on the process and the relationship with the person who's coming to you for the guidance
Hmm.
rather than the outcome. And there's not only if you put your attention towards the process and tune into giving that present guidance to the best of your ability, you receive all these benefits that we've already mentioned. You learn the content, what you're sharing, whether it's about relationships or emotions um, or a very tangible specific aspect of like a business function or a marketing function or whatever.
Hmm.
Not only do you know it better, whenever you're so in the process, I'm going to use a basketball example here. I've got a kid who I've been working with for 4 years, and we have always been so focused on having great training sessions and having great workouts, never looking at the outcome, never
Hmm.
looking at outcome or results. And he went from a player who, as a ninth grader, he made varsity, but he rarely played, to being the only sophomore, I believe, in the city to be all conference and was the leading scorer. And two things that are amazing about that is he got those outcomes and I got to see him make those outcomes without that being what we focused on, for one. And for two, in a I want to say positively self-serving manner, that's one of those situations where I'm like, damn, what I'm teaching is really good. It's
Yeah.
actually valuable. It actually works. And like and maybe for some people that's especially when you're first getting started, it's hard for you to just assume that it's valuable. You have to let your heart lead you into it and trust that the results will come over time. And I think it's important to know, if you go into any type of dynamic like that only looking for the results, they're going to be harder to find.
Right. And another excellent aspect of this to point out, because for me, part of what it goes to is motivation. Why are you doing this? If you want to teach, if you want to mentor, if you want to put yourself in that position of modeling and sharing, what is your motivation? Do you want to be seen as a hero? Do you want to be seen as a savior? Do you want to see yourself as a savior? Like, why are you doing this?
Mhm.
Because if your motivations are sort of not on point, you might get some results at first, but it can really corrupt the process.
Mhm.
And you might find out that you feel resentful at some point, because it's like,
Yeah.
well, why is nobody seeing me as a hero for doing this? It's like, well, if you go into it like that, that's kind of a sideways kind of motivation on the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
and whether if you take on a mentoring relationship, but your real motive is to have someone to do all of your busy work, or to,
yeah,
like, it
that
bleeds
happens.
through, it
Yeah,
bleeds through, it
yeah,
bleeds through. And whether the person you're mentoring is 9 or 19 or 29, they can sense it. Even
right,
if they don't say it, they can sense it, which is why it's, as you just said, checking your intention and aligning with that true intention that I want to I want to be a conduit of whatever wisdom that I have, or knowledge that I have, and I want to lead with the heart on this rather than um kind of your own motives is really important if you want your heart to feel the full benefit of the relationship.
right. And it don't patronize people, right? So like, if you see yourself as like, I'm up here and you're down here and I'm doing you a big favor, it's not always conscious. It's not always conscious. So that's another opportunity in these kind of situations where we're talking about mentoring or offering yourself as a model or learning or service or whatever to people who are younger. It's like, it really pays to pay attention to like what's actually going on internally for you there, because there are different ways that you can trip up the process. One of them is by having poor boundaries. If you, and that's one of the things that I think is a benefit of doing the sorts of things we're talking about is you get to check your boundaries. Because if you're someone who has a hard time saying no to people, um, then you can easily flip over into that kind of rescue mode. That sort of like, well, I'm gonna spend an hour with you, and it blows up to 2 hours. Um, Now you're not modeling good boundaries for the other person, and that's just, I don't, in my opinion, that's just not the best way to go about it, because you're modeling behavior, you're modeling all kinds of behavior, and they're looking at you.
Mhm.
uh, and I had a counselor like way back when, that like our sessions would always be twice as long as they were scheduled to be, and I would beg him at the beginning, look, let's not go over, and he would. And the quality of the experience, it's almost like somebody was just letting the air out of it every time, because it was just the whole thing was just too shaky.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think it's also worth looking at, like, this is an opportunity for you to kind of revisit your own boundaries in terms of how much you give, and why, and what happens if somebody expects or wants more from you than you really have, or that you can, or that you're comfortable. Do you just try to do it anyway because maybe you're trying to impress that person in some way? So I don't know. There's a lot of opportunities for learning from the
Yeah.
side of the mentor
So
here.
you mentioned you just articulated an example with boundaries and how that can be observed in another way to learn, which made me think, in response to that, learning boundaries, learning all processes, all of your idiosyncrasies, the ways that you do what you do are going to be picked up on more so than the medium that you're working with, whether it's
Yeah,
basketball, whether it's men's coaching, whether it's an architectural apprenticeship.
right.
Like, the subject matter is one thing, but consciously and subconsciously, you're communicating all these other things more than what you're teaching them. It's how you teach them, how
Right.
you do what you do, and how you navigate your relationship with them. They pick up on that as well.
And are you in alignment with, in terms of integrity, in terms of your values, and what you describe? People use the word subtext for that, which is basically the content that's not really part of the explicit content of the
Mhm.
experience. It's everything that kind of frames and underlies it, in terms of the presentation of yourself. Because people notice if you keep your word, if you practice what you preach. I think it's helpful also as a mentor to acknowledge um, your own uh, inadequacies, to acknowledge the fact that you're still in progress
Mhm.
yourself, uh,
Mhm.
when it's appropriate. Again, it's not for you to get validation from the other person. It's to give them, because a lot of that sort of experience, I think, can be providing external reference points that they don't have. And so for a lot of younger people, it's helpful for someone that they look at as being an expert or accomplished or whatever, to, when it's appropriate, acknowledge, well, yeah, I'm still a little weak in this area myself. This is something I have to work on.
Mhm.
It I think in some ways it kind of demythologizes you
Mhm.
as an individual, as well as whatever that thing is, that you're trying to share and help them with.
And when you're living out the archetype of teacher or mentor, showing that you're human is so valuable, because you're also communicating, don't expect when you get to this phase that you're going to have it all figured out,
Mhm.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
well, I think that was some really great stuff, Rick. Thank you for sharing as always. And till next week, my friend.
All right. Yeah, good topic, and good job on the conversation today, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
What's up? This is Chris Wilson. Thank you so much for checking out the content, and I hope you found value within it. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share, as it helps the channel grow and helps me continue my work of seeking deeper truths and sharing it with the world.